Now we really want to engage the intersection of HIV, and Reverend Sembreka is going to share with us about the SAFE model, which really engages the intersection of HIV. So I now turn it to McDonald Sembreka.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you, my colleagues, for starting the ball rolling, and thank you to all. Yeah, let me start with a problem. Recently, my president challenged Parliament in Malawi to say she wanted to take back laws that criminalizes homosexuality. The first people to cry foul or to criticize the president were the religious community. And my president felt intimidated. Some of them did allude to the fact that perhaps because McDonald is now hooked up into the president's team, he has influenced the president to include that in her statement. But that was before she even had appointed me to the current position that I'm holding. Which is sad, because faith communities must be communities that uphold issues of dignity of the human person and the flourishing of the integral human good of all people of God. As in Erela, we realize that HIV is not a comfort zone, but rather HIV calls us to emerge out of our shell and comfort, because we realize that HIV is dynamic. Although faith communities tend to think that HIV is a linear epidemic, and then we can find a magic bullet in arresting it. As in Erela, we come from a background where we have characterized faith-based response to HIV with 6 evils. The 6 evils are stigma, shame, discrimination, denial, inaction, and misaction. They are interlinked. They include issues of inertia, issues of passionately talking about wrong things, and doing wrong things that are not informed by evidence, but rather informed by what we tend to believe in, the myths around HIV. After having looked at these 6 evils, we came up with a model that interrogates the 6 evils as a response to those 6 evils. And that's when we came up with the SAFE model. For a long time, people felt that the ABC model was a magic bullet. But you and me know, much as it has done, how much it could do, but there are issues that are left out of the ABC. What with prevention of mother-to-child transmission? What with the use of injecting, what about the injecting drug users? And other related aspects. The SAFE model recognizes that HIV is dynamic and calls for a dynamic and comprehensive and all-inclusive response to the epidemic. It recognizes that HIV is characterized by many vulnerabilities that underlie it, and that act as drivers that further new infections, which under normal circumstances would have been overlooked. In the society that continues to take on board the fact that prevalences are being reduced. The unfortunate scenario is that vulnerabilities increase. HIV among the LGBT community, in the recent studies in like Malawi, is at 25%, 21 to 25%. Hence, the need to adopt a comprehensive approach to HIV that addresses these vulnerabilities is imperative in our countries, especially in the so-called epicenter of the epidemic. But unfortunately, the opposite is the truth. What is this SAFE model? The SAFE model talks about, the S is talking about safer practices. The safer practices embraces the ABC plus safe blood and perhaps what we call now the option B plus, which encourages issues of prevention of mother-to-child transmission in our countries and other aspects. The A looks at addressing access to services and treatment. In a continent where, for example, you cannot access treatment to deal with opportunistic infections or those diseases that we have struggled with like malaria, diarrhea, and the like, we need to intensify the call for access to services. Because HIV, as I alluded to earlier, is very dynamic and it calls for a comprehensive packaging. The V stands for voluntary counseling and testing. And this must be non-stigmatizing. A counseling and testing where you go and they don't say you are HIV positive, but you have sores on your back. Or a counseling and testing that does not demand some impossibilities that will intimidate a client who comes and accesses the services. The E stands for empowerment of the vulnerable. That includes the girl child. There's a lot of abuse of children, violation, women. There's a lot of gender-based violence, which we rarely speak as faith communities. But they have a closer linkage between HIV and GBV. There are vulnerable groups like commercial sex workers, who are them and us. Oftentimes we say, leave them. They are paying for what they do. It talks about the gay and lesbian community being empowered by law, by faith communities becoming accommodating and inclusive and accepting through developing of theologies that are inclusive, theologies that interrogate the alienation and exclusion that characterize our faith communities. And then look at issues that pull down which individuals that drives the epidemic even further and help us to overcome a denialist approach. In Inerela, we believe that HIV is our common enemy. We don't waste our time looking at dogmas. Because by the time you spend talking about dogmas, people get infected and people die because you are too busy looking at dogmas. It calls for a comprehensive and inclusive response. Let me end by saying, in one of the write-ups of one of the eminent persons in Africa, whom I respect so much, Emeritus Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he interrogates the church by asking it. Is HIV asking the church to do something new? Or is HIV asking the church or the faith community to be the faith community that it is called to be? Thank you.
Thank you, McDonald, for those words and that wisdom that you've shared, and for sharing with us about the SAVE model and the ways in which it can be used comprehensively to address HIV and its potential for addressing the intersections of HIV and sexual orientation very, very well. And I especially appreciated your quote at the end of Desmond Tutu, and also of understanding the real enemy in the work that we have to do.